British photojournalist Tom Barlow Brown is joining us in Sarajevo. Tom, welcome to N1.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining. We have a chance to read about your work on your Twitter profile, but I would like to start off with a simple question. Who is Tom Barlow Brown, and what is Tom doing in Bosnia?
So I'm a British photojournalist. I previously studied at the London College of Communication, and I'm here in Bosnia. I've been working on a project in Bosnia for around a year now, about the Dutch Bat peacekeepers and their role in the events in Srebrenica.
And why is that so intriguing to you? Why are you drawn to the Bosnian events back in the 90s? What is that really intrigues you back in the... Because you're young, you're a young person, and you are here in Bosnia, you've covered certain events as well recently, but why? Why are you drawn to this so much?
I think it's because I mean, I was born in the 90s, so I mean, I wasn't old enough to really sort of be aware of what was happening in Bosnia on the TV. But it's just the more that I've read about what happened here, it's sort of interesting because Bosnia is on the doorstep of Europe, and then it's unimaginable. Yeah, I mean, it's unimaginable to really sort of that these events could have taken place here, and that's I want sort of I've always
just
wanted
2 hours flight, like flight to a different part of Europe, and this is happening in Europe.
Exactly. Yeah.
At the brick of 21st century. Do you remember how much was it discussed in the media in Great Britain when you were a kid? Do you remember how much? Was it enough? Was it not enough? Is that something that really got you thinking about this? Yeah, I mean, what happened?
I think what really got me thinking about it was when I was old enough, when I was sort of 16 or something like that, a teenager. I was, reading books about the war in Bosnia. Okay. And that's sort of what got me interested in it. But I think before there wasn't really that much discussion. Maybe on the news, perhaps once a year, if there was the memorial events for Srebrenica or something like that happened. But I don't think there was much really that I can remember.
Not much. But when you did you speak about it to your family? What did they say when you said, "Hey, this is something I want to cover. This is something I want to discover"? What did they tell you?
I think my parents were sort of they're supportive. I mean, it's actually interesting. Once I started talking to people like my parents' age about the work that I'm doing, I sort of found out that there are actually quite a few people in the UK who have been to Bosnia or worked here during the 90s. And I mean, a friend of my mother's, she was a cameraman for Reuters, for example.
So there is a line of work in your family as well. That's the line of work.
I mean, my grandfather was a journalist here during the 60s under Tito.
Oh, wow. Okay, so there is a platform that you actually go from. It runs in a family, as we could say. All right, so the topics and events you cover, you're interested in is mostly about the war, about Srebrenica, about genocide. And I'm holding here, I would like to show this to our viewers, a book which is exactly what we see on our wall at the moment, and it says, "Don't shoot the piano player." You said this is a draft. We started off as a draft, and this is your work. And there is this. I'll let you read it. This is really interesting. That's how the book got the name. So
this is the exchange between Colonel Tom Karaman's, the Dutch Bat commander, and Ratko Mladic. And this happened during their negotiations in the Fontana Hotel, just next to, in Bratanac near Srebrenica. And so Karaman says, "I've always said I'm just a piano player, and you don't shoot the piano player." And then Mladic replied, "Well, you're a lousy piano player."
How much truth is there in that?
Well, this is actually on, you can see this on film in the Serb propaganda film, which they made of the of the exchange in the hotel.
So we see the pictures in this book, and we see it on our wall as well. What really interests me that you spoke to some of the soldiers of the Dutch division of the United Nations Protection Forces, and that person is, if I can find it, it is here. What is his name?
So this is Henk van den Berg.
Okay, that's Henk. And what did he tell you? He was here in Srebrenica when everything happened. So
Henk was a communications specialist. So he was responsible for the radio equipment and the communications between the Dutch sort of headquarters team in Podgorica and the UN here in Sarajevo. So he was responsible for sending out the faxes and communications like that. But towards the end of the UN's involvement in Srebrenica, when it, in July '95, he and all the other Dutch troops had to go out into the compound and deal with the situation. So
What's his story? This is him.
Yes.
What is his story? What did he tell you? Hey, this was wrong. We knew this was going to happen. Did he tell you this?
Yes. Well, I mean, they couldn't imagine that something like this would happen. I mean, he was sort of 19, 20 when the genocide happened in '95. So, a lot of these guys were young.
Didn't know what they were doing.
They were drafted. They were conscripts into the army doing national service. So, it's that they were sort of too young to really kind of imagine that something like this would happen. In Europe.
Yeah. In Europe, in almost 21st century. The Dutch Supreme Court decision, you follow the Srebrenica and the Hague Court and the ICTY, is on the country's partial responsibility for Srebrenica is the unique case in the world that a country takes responsibility, even if it's a small percentage. This is a really unique, and this is the only case where a country actually brings a verdict. Such as this one. How would you comment on this?
I think it's important that they've recognised the responsibility of the government, but the 10% figure that they gave is really it's almost like meaningless because it's sort of only 10%. I mean, there's and also it detracts, I think, from the fact that yes, the Dutch government, the Dutch military were responsible in some way for the actions of inaction of the Dutch forces there. But I think what really needs to be looked at is the wider international community and how they were aware that something like this might happen, but they didn't act.
They didn't act. They knew. Every interviewee that I had across this table said, "Well, we knew." We knew this was going to happen. We did not do anything about it. Let's go through this book a little bit more. Let's comment on a few more photos, maybe. Okay, so this is Henk. You spoke to Henk.
Yeah, this is him during the war.
All right, the 19-year-old boy.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah.
All right, and we have the graffitis and the writings on the wall.
Yeah.
Which are still there.
Yeah.
Actually, how did they? What did they tell you? Why are these writings on the wall, these graffiti there? What were they thinking?
Well, I mean, they were there for around a year, and you can imagine that there's probably had a lot of time on their hands, so it's sort of
there were some of them very offensive, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't put that in the book because it's already out there, and so I thought it was more interesting to put in things which were sort of less well known from around the factory complex. But yeah, I mean, there's some of that graffiti is quite racist, and yeah, I mean, but you have to remember that there were several different groups of peacekeepers there, so it's hard to. I mean, it could have been the Canadians, it could have been a different group of Dutch people. So I didn't want to.
Can I tell you something?
Yes.
I grew up in Holland, and the handwriting that is very specific for Dutch people are those that I found on the wall in Srebrenica.
Yeah.
And so I'm pretty clear this is done by Dutch. Yeah. By the Dutch, Srebrenica.
No, sorry, but what I wanted to say was I didn't want to insinuate that it was these particular soldiers in the book. So.
Yes. So what is this picture about?
So this is a group of Bosnians who worked in the UN compound, and it was taken by Henk here.
All right. So Henk was the one that was taking all the pictures and documenting.
There are other. I mean, I spoke to other Dutch soldiers who have archive images, but because I was focusing on the guys that were there in '95. I didn't use some of the other photos that I found because they were from earlier during the war.
All right, this is Dutch, definitely. Nachtvoeding, night feeding. It's graffiti. What is this about?
So this is Remco. He's another one of the interviewees.
All right.
This is his Dutch military pass.
Okay. Pretty simple.
Yeah, unfortunately, I wasn't able to get any of his archive pictures to use. Otherwise, I would have done the same that I'd done with these guys, with sort of comparison. But
so they have all these pictures with them. They carry these pictures with them.
Yeah, I mean.
And when they speak to you, they show you certain things from the past. That they were the situation they found themselves in.
I mean, you can see here, these are some of the photos that this Remco took.
This is Remco.
Yeah.
Okay, what did Remco tell you at the time? How did he perceive the events that occurred in Srebrenica in '95?
Well, I think he had a different perspective from the other two guys who are in the book because he was the only one I interviewed which was a trained combat soldier. So he was involved in actually fighting in some way. So he told me that, you know, the Dutch troops did as best they could to try and stop the Serbs from advancing further. But you know, he still thinks it was a unimaginable crime.
Situation and crime.
Yeah.
Why is it so important for you, Tom, to document, to make an archive of these documents, whether they are pictures or stories, and why is it important for you to do this?
Because I think that the role of the international community and the failures of the UN still hasn't been addressed fully.
Okay.
And I mean, I'm not really trying to. I'm not. This book isn't. This work isn't to sort of, you know, it's not to blame anyone really, but it's to highlight that issue. And it's more of a sort of. It's a resource of the testimonies of these soldiers. So that people can better understand, that perspective.
So there are three sides. There are victims, there is perpetrator, and there are the Dutch bad.
Yeah, the international community.
The international community in it. Which one of these stories left the most impact on you? And why? And this is now the perception of the crime. How do we perceive the crime that occurred, that happened in Srebrenica?
You mean the stories from the peacekeepers?
The stories, yes, from the peacekeepers.
I think Henk's story was probably. We talked for quite a long time about his experiences, and I think his was probably left the most impact because he described it in the most kind of raw sort of way. What happened? He spoke about how the heat and the amount of people that were there in Podachari in '95 and the smell, for example, and how he kind of still remembers that. And I think that's something I still remember now when I was writing the book. And
did he tell you about the knowledge that they had before they came to Srebrenica? what did they know prior their trip to Srebrenica? Did they know what they were going to see, what they were going to experience themselves? Because, as you said, those were 19-year-old boys, practically.
Yeah. Yeah, well, he said they actually knew nothing.
Nothing.
The Dutch government didn't tell them, they didn't give them any information before they arrived. Yeah, right. He thought it was just going to be a regular kind of, normal mission. And, he went there and he imagined that there would be places where you could buy, food and like cigarettes on the UN base, but they said there was nothing. So,
there was nothing. Wow. How much does, back home, how much in Great Britain do we know about Srebrenica today, 24 years later?
I think it's definitely still talked about.
Okay.
And you have organisations like Remember Srebrenica that operate in the United Kingdom to try and highlight these, the stories. But I don't think maybe amongst people my age or younger than me, it's that well known because it's
they have no idea, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a sort of generation kind of removed,
shift,
I think.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I do know the organization. It's called Remembering Srebrenica Scotland. There's also in Scotland.
Yeah, I mean,
one in Great Britain.
Yeah.
And how would you comment on then when we talk about glorification of convicted war criminals in Bosnia and Herzegovina and in our region? How does that? What does that say to you? Is it something that you could understand? You can understand? Just taking in consideration that we have documents, we have pictures, we have videos of what happened, obviously genocide, and ICTY ruled genocide. And yet today you have some of the highest government representatives that are, it's the negligence, they are denying genocide. And, on top of everything, there is a glorification of convicted war criminals. What would you say to them or to something like that?
Well, I mean, I can't understand it, but I also can understand it in some way, given the sort of political climate at the moment. But yeah, it's unimaginable. It's like people denying the Holocaust. It's like how this information is there. Why deny it?
And there's still anti-Semitism. I mean, when we look at that.
Of course, yeah. It's people believe, what they want to believe. I suppose if it furthers their own,
ignorance.
Yeah, ignorance. Yeah.
Ignorance, right? Is that a good word?
It is ignorance. Yeah.
How much? What is next for you? What are the you mentioned before we started taping this interview? You mentioned you would like to stay in Bosnia. In the break of when a lot of people leaving Bosnia, you would like to stay here. There are some projects you would like to work on.
Yeah.
Why would you like to stay? And what are the projects you are working on? And what is the outcome we are out to see eventually?
Well, I'm working on projects about the refugee crisis here.
Okay.
And the situation in Bihać. And I'm also working on something about the pollution in Zenica as well.
Okay.
Which is, I mean, environmentalism is a big, issue now, sort of globally. And I think it's important to address that in Bosnia as well.
Maybe the important question would be who you work for.
Well, I'm freelance, so
you're freelance. Okay. Yeah, so when you report on these events from migrant crisis or pollution in Zenica, climate change, or where does it go? Where can we see that? Well,
I have a website, but it's mostly if I whoever can whoever will publish it, I suppose, is the
all right, we are. What is the name of your website?
It's just my name at .com.
Okay. As you can see on in our screen, please visit the website. But you still haven't answered the question. Why would you like to stay in Bosnia? I mean, not just the projects. I mean, you have to have something more to it. There has to be something more to it.
Yeah, I mean, the more that I come back to Bosnia, or also the Balkans, the more I'm sort of interested. Like, the more I kind of learn about this part of Europe, and I now have lots of friends here as well. So. And it's, well, partly it's also, it's a much more interesting place than the UK as well for me.
Are you building up your life here? Would you like to build up your life here?
Well, yeah, I think, yeah, we'll see.
I mean, it's good food, good weather, and pretty women, right?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Definitely a place to stay. Tom, I would like to thank you for taking time to speak with us. I think this is very interesting. I'm looking forward to see the final draft and the final product of this book. This is a very important archive, especially when it comes to understanding the events back in the 90s, especially Srebrenica, 1995, and it's good to hear the third side as well. We haven't had the chance to hear that, and now we do have the chance through you. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And then good luck, of course.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sergio Paini is joining us in Sarajevo. Sergio, good morning and welcome to N1.
Yeah, good morning. It's very nice to be here, for me to be back in Sarajevo, a town that is very dear to me because I dedicated most of my studying years to, and then I came here. I started coming here as a humanitarian aid worker immediately just after the war. Then I attended this master program, which is one of the few ones in the world, the only one in the region that is financed by the Italian government and the European Union, about democracy and human rights in Southeast Europe.
And are you transpassing through Bosnia?
Yes, this time, yes, because then I worked with the Bosnian section of this NGO, this German NGO, Gesellschaft für bedrohte Völker, Dusch für zaugrožene narode, and through them I worked with the mothers from Srebrenica, that part of the organization that was led by
we'll go to that in a minute. We'll go to that. I had a chance to start your book, to read your book, Mothers of Justice, and it treats genocide and perception of genocide in general, and the genocide in Srebrenica. You try to explain what the genocide is in the very foreword of the book. And there were three questions that I would like us to try to answer at this point. And those are, what is genocide? What kinds of reaction does it give? And how can an individual oppose and fight for justice, and an individual?
Yes, this was. These are the topics of my MA thesis that I developed into this book, and of course, you said what is genocide, because it started from, let's say, the scientific definition of genocide, which is important to get to know, because otherwise, there is always the risk of inflation. I mean, of using this word not in a proper way. But at the same time, we see that with the time passing by, even that definition that started immediately after World War II has to be redefined and changed, because, for example, the political aim of the attempt, at least, to remove a part of the population was not considered, and this is the case, for example, what happened in Cambodia because of political reasons. Because after World War II, they were the superpowers. Soviet Union was against this. And especially because we know, and we saw even here in Bosnia, that even when genocide happens, and I underline this happens when there is not just the elimination, but also the attempt, the explicit will to erase a part of the population, be it for ethnic reason or political one, economical one. Political one, I say, not in an official form, but in practice. But anyhow, there is also something particular about that. that. In Bosnia, for example, and then we had the International Tribunal in The Hague. We had anyhow, for example, the introduction of mass rape as a kind of mass weapon of war. Yes, and these are all aspects that after the master I went on to work on, to research with my professor of my AMA thesis, Dr. Janja Beć-Neumann, that organized my course in Dubrovnik about war crimes and genocide. So about this very topic.
All right. So, but the genocide is there is a definition of genocide in particular, and there is a perception of genocide. As you said yourself, the very word of genocide is used sometimes wrongfully. In what cases could we say it's used wrongfully?
You know, there are many cases because it's many propagandas. So it's not. I know it's very crude maybe to say that, but it cannot be just. It's also a matter of scale. It implies different situations into that. While, for example, there are some situations like in a single place, a massacre is not a genocide. So you know that very well because you are fighting still for truth. And the mothers from Srebrenica that I worked with and they wanted, when they say that we are fighting for truth, they want, for example, this to be established, and it has been established that at least in Srebrenica genocide has happened. So and you know that, for example, for other parts of Bosnia this hasn't been the case according to international justice. So we are talking here about something that cannot actually be denied because the number of the victims is still, you know, when you look at it, it's something incredible. But we see that even at a much smaller case, there is some attempt to use this word in order sometimes to attract attention. But this, if we are not paying attention to that, implies that maybe any kind of revenge or any situation can be in the media, in the society, called like that. So as I was saying, Raphael Lemkin, who made up this word, came after World War II. So there is a kind of list now of the genocides happened in this very century, starting from the Armenian one, then of course what happened to the Jews in the Second World War.
Then we have Rwanda.
Yes,
we have
Rwanda in Srebrenica.
And now United Nations ruled genocide upon Rohingyas as well.
Rohingya in Myanmar, yes. So why? According to the definition that I said before, for example, Rohingya is a Muslim minority in Myanmar, former Burma. So there was an attempt they targeted a special group. So, for example, a big difference is not indiscriminate elimination, but attempting to eradicate a group. You called it here ethnic cleansing because it was the intent.
It is the first time used in the Balkans.
Yes.
The word ethnic cleansing, first time used in the world, in the Balkans. All right, Mr. Paini, we try to answer the three questions of genocide in your book, Mothers of Genocide, and these questions point immediately to the main topic of your paper, the extraordinary work of Mrs. Fadila. Tell me something more about Fadila.
Yes, Fadila, and every time I come to Sarajevo, I go and at least and say hi, because it what struck me, and part of my research that I started from, as we just said, from the definition, from the historic examples. But then I wanted to, according also to my journalistic upbringing, to give an example of a person that with a historian by formation, and she didn't wait, for the war to end, in order to collect testimonies of what was happening in central Bosnia. And this work, has been very useful when during the war, then the United Nations decided to establish the ICTY, in the tribunal in the Hague. So her precious work is also an answer to the other question. So what an individual can do. I mean, simply, you put it very simply, but it seems very simple, but it's not. It's starting being active. And if possible, raising your voice. But even if it's not possible to raise our voice, like in this is like what she did, go to the people who had been thrown away from their homes, or to the relatives of the victims, and ask what has happened, record, and then of course check these sources, and doing a work that is very useful both for historians in the long run, but immediately after for the justice.
For the justice and the perception of the false perception of the world towards Bosnia and Herzegovina at that time, where it said it was a civil war.
Yeah.
We hear that a lot in the foreign media, that in Bosnia and Herzegovina happened actually was civil war. And that's the perception that was treated in this book, and also with Fadila Memišević, that you also had worked with. What happened in Bosnia and Herzegovina? Perception, in your perception?
In my perception, and this is linked to the topic of the book, is that if, as the international justice stated, there has been a genocide, and we saw it in Srebrenica, so people that were innocent were targeted, people as young as 16 or older people, just for their you cannot even say here in Bosnia for their faith, but for their culture, for their history. So it was this is what happening on the ground. And then, of course, the argument of civil war, can be contrasted by the fact that the parts in Bosnia, so not just one, but at least two of them, they had the backing of their neighbors, and with the explicit intent to either carve up, other parts of Bosnia, and so and this was very evident, not just by the meetings of the previous presidents, Milošević, Tudjman, what they wrote, what they wanted to do with Bosnia, the documents, but also with what happened in the military ground. We know Srebrenica, the role of the Bosnian Serbs, and the
international community,
but also what happened between 1993 and 1994 between Bosniaks and Croats. So there were, of course, forces from outside Bosnia that wanted, to this state, if either disappear or
This brings us back to our first question: what is genocide? And this is, as we had a chance to talk about, there can be only intention in ethnic cleansing and genocide. Without massacre, it would be still considered genocide.
It cannot be. There must be. It cannot be just that, but. Here, what happened is that there must be the intent. Yes, so it's not that by chance, you are among the victims. But then, of course, it's a matter of extent. But what happened here, and now, I'm talking
beyond the extent.
And what happened in Srebrenica? And that's what happened in Srebrenica when practically the biggest part of the male population, has been eliminated. So. What happened there is without doubt, and so that was what prompted the ICTY, to rule according to this point of view. In some other parts, but of course, in some other parts there was the intent, but they didn't manage, to get to this point. So, from a journalistic point of view, you could use this word on a state level, on the national level. But in order, and then I make this very clearly in the book, from a juridical point of view, and actually what has happened in The Hague, states that in Srebrenica there is no doubt there are all the things that define, that act, that war crime as genocide. So it's more than war crimes and crimes against humanity.
I would like to talk about Hatidža Mehmedović. You, all together with your colleagues Naumann and Goldstone, gave in memoriam last year in Belgrade to Hatidža Mehmedović, and that was the first and the only in memoriam that has been given to her. Who was Hatidža to you?
Hatidža was the person that took me by hand into Srebrenica. It was before it was just after 2002, 2003, so before 10 years after the massacre, when something started.
She introduced you to Srebrenica.
Yes, because she was working, co-working with Society for Threatened Peoples, with Fadila Memišević and Belma Žulčić, and so we with them, we went there and to actually answer their needs, which were very simple at that stage. They just wanted to go back where they had spent all their lives. They had nothing more there, no husband, the sons, they had all been killed. But she was impressively, strong in saying, okay, but I have nowhere else to go. This is where I belong to. And then I want truth. We said that before. So she started. It was not just being there, facing all the difficulties of the time, because now situation has changed a bit. But Srebrenica keeps being part of a part of Bosnia where some administrators, are anyhow somehow connected to that. So it's not easy. It was not easy at the time to go back. So
what did she tell you more? What were the difficulties she was facing at the time? What was the biggest obstacle for her and for the mothers? What have you experienced at that time?
At the time they were not welcome, because
it takes courage to go back to a place like that.
Yeah, she and the other mothers, they told us that of course there were often some kind of intimidations, to send them back, to Tuzla, Sarajevo, where there were refugees camps. Well, what do you do there? But it's impressively somehow how they were. They felt. Not hate, but absolutely
unwelcome.
not.
Firstly,
yes,
right?
Because they people who had committed crimes or were related to people who had committed crimes, they wanted that memory to be forgotten. So this is also what prompted the people who committed the massacre to dig, the mass graves, and then to put all the rest here and trying to conceal that. So now this is not possible anymore. But silence is, the most subtle way of concealing this. And so she also had the courage to raise up the voice, with demonstrations here and in Holland and in The Hague. It struck me as a journalist the fact that as a person, they could be, even after what they suffered, very sweet on the personal level, in the sense that not feeling hate towards another one, also from the other part in Srebrenica.
Even after losing everybody.
Yeah. But they were very strict and demanding in terms of international justice. International justice.
International justice.
They wanted truth. So what struck me is the fact that sometimes we, as a journalist, as outsiders, we thought sometimes that it could be a step towards that justice, and they were very crystal clear in saying, no, what happened there is not exactly what you said. It was worse. It is. And I think we know that exactly what happened in ICTY. It's not exactly everything they denounced. No, this is also a matter of, for example, we said it before with the mass war rapes and the work done by another very strong extraordinary woman like Bakir Hasicic, Žena žrtva rata, because this has not been recognized explicitly.
As war crime. Explicitly as a war crime. Even though those are means of war.
And this is this is another fight they have to.
Do you think it's political?
In a way, yes. In a way.
And do you think the ICTY has treated the victims fairly and the families of the victims?
Not maybe not 100%, but due to the situations, it's a big step forward.
Well, if it wasn't for ICTY,
it's easier for me to say that than for people who actually.
No other war has been documented like the one in Bosnia and Herzegovina. It seems like the world is learning from the events that occurred in Bosnia and Herzegovina in the 90s. How does that one perceive? How's that a journalist, a historian, an author like you perceive? As you said, this happened right at the doorstep of my own home. It could, if it happened there, it could happen to me.
Yes, this is, what is very extraordinary. The fact that I know it may sound the fact. I know it is not fair, but the fact that it happened in the heart of Europe, and the fact that for 3.5 years, actually, the reaction was so slow. This really
the international reaction.
You're talking about. And then we saw all the contradictions, the divisions that are still there. So yes, we can say what happened, and many politicians say what happened. It cannot be repeated. I mean, I'm not that optimistic, because this also has been used also for some other mistakes, according to my opinion, in some other situations where this has been used, as an excuse now for other interventions. You didn't have interventions. There were situations where much more clear and worse, and you had it in some other context. And also what happened here had happened, even before. So history should learn the people what happened, and
we have to remember Alexander Langer as well. Yeah, is an Italian in the European Parliament that really was very, very loud when it came to Bosnia and Herzegovina and the war in Bosnia and Herzegovina. He took his own life. Yeah,
he took it. I mean, so
just a few days before Srebrenica
in July '95. Yes,
exactly, '95. Did you know Alexander by any chance, or you knew him probably from media? Yeah,
from media, and then I know some of his legacy and his relatives. So his experience is very touching, because it's also an idea of what Europe should mean. And at the time, I mean, I think knowing his relatives and the people, he was so pure, in really believing that and thinking that it could be possible if people were a bit more like that and just less egoistic or cynical.
He couldn't handle the hypocrisy.
Yes, and some people say, for politicians, politicians shouldn't be like that. It depends on the idea you have of world and world relations.
Could we say that
could be that this is an example? And when we talked about mothers from Srebrenica, we say that they don't want revenge. They want truth to be established, and truth also means that it's okay, and we must keep on talking about that, because otherwise. It's not that we are not sure that it's not going to be. It's not sure that it's not going to be repeated.
How would you then comment on the cases of denial of genocide in our region from top political representatives, trying to silence the truth, trying to silence and just denying, not only just denying genocide, but glorifying war criminals that have committed genocide in Bosnia and Herzegovina? What would you say to them?
To them, I mean, it's okay.
For somebody who studied genocide, who's been here, who,
in fact, this is,
and even somebody from the outside that perceives it.
I react, also like this with. So at first, you are like kind of shocked, and then you understand that it's a kind of the misuse, and they simply don't tell the whole truth. I mean, of course, the truth is always more complex, so it's never, black and white. But what happened there, I mean, it's cannot be questioned. So now, for example, I think we see fewer and fewer people, who questions, but they say about, okay, but we also had this, and they talk about numbers. I mean, this is this is. Once you've been there, once you have met the people who were, personally touched by that.
There's no question that.
There's no question. Especially, and this is why the book, the research, especially because, for example, what happened in Srebrenica, it was not a kind of reaction, a revenge for something that had happened before. Of course, for example, in Srebrenica there has been a siege, so there are other kinds of crimes against other people and so on. But there, then you took the town. I mean, Bosnian Serb took the town. So there were the Dutch bed there, so there was the opportunity to find any other solution, even military, without that massacre. So there was the explicit intent to do that.
I had just a few days ago sitting across the table. Actually, I had a lot of people sitting across this table where we spoke about genocide. I even spoke to the French commander of United Nations Forces, Protection Forces, and he was here in Bosnia, and he said, "Well, we knew this was going to happen, and we really did nothing. We just enabled this to happen. We prolonged the siege of Sarajevo. We enabled massacre to happen in Srebrenica." So it was pretty clear. Like you said, there were so many options there to prevent this human tragedy, and they were not used. The options were not used. I would just like to go back to my last question. You are the first. You are the first person in the world, in the region, that has master's degree on genocide. And like you said, you studied the genocide in Bosnia and Herzegovina. There are in total maybe 4 or 5 people in the world. How important?
It's not people. It's there are master programs about democracy and human rights, and inside
just a few in the world.
Yes, I think 5 in the world, and inside this academic program, I was the first here to research, thanks to my professor Nadia Janja Bech-Neumann, to go deep into this subject, and then other follows.
Okay. How important it is to study, because throughout history we saw genocide multiple times, like we said in the beginning of our interview. How important it is to really concentrate ourselves as humanity when it comes to genocide and study these topics in order to prevent it. Why so little? It's very important because it makes very clear what is it, what is not, and especially the steps that take to that. One. Second point, it makes people aware that it also has some consequences, and this is very important. Adolf Hitler, I mean, it was quoted by saying, Goebbels, or anyhow, the Nazis. The Nazis said, who remembers now what happens to the Armenians before Shoah? So, studying why did they cite the Armenians? Because this is also a kind of genocide. So, they knew what they were talking about, and they probably knew that they were going to repeat it. So they knew what it meant. But that's some why other people, it was important not to clarify, give the clarification.
Give the clarifications, because you were asking before, when I meet these people who deny or try to say or it was not, to try to put to a smaller scale. I really, it's very annoying, because it's also it's like history is being read as at the football pitch, at the football stadium, like, oh no, I'm for this and for that, and it's not like that. We are talking about people. We are talking about tens of thousands of people who have been murdered, and even the international community, they should, study in order to know where the facts are going. Because of course they said we let it happen. But I think that
it happened. It's too late when we say, well, we let it happen.
They let it happen because also they didn't. I think they didn't want to maybe to put attention, but they thought that this enclave Srebrenica is lost. Maybe this is an advantage in trying to cut the country. But they didn't expect, the aggressors to go that far, and so they didn't realize that the genocide could happen. If you study, you know that
the steps of genocide,
and you know that
the intent, the organizing, the planning. It's easy then to right.
Exactly as you said, the organizing, the fact that you had.
That was already very clear.
Very clear.
That was very clear.
But without maybe thinking that they could go that far, they didn't do much. It's not just about that.
But then it happened.
It's not just about that. We know it's also about political will, someone against the other, the fact that they were there and they risked their own lives and they were there. Okay, but I think that also the people in their offices who took or actually didn't take any decision, they didn't know about what they were facing.
They really didn't know. That's why this is important. Mr. Paini, I would like to thank you for this very thorough discussion. I think it's now very, very clear. It was my honor really to have you across this table. Thank you very much for joining me, and I hope to see you next time in Sarajevo as well one time.
With great pleasure.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.